Joining us now from London is Owen Gibson. He is chief sports correspondent for the Guardian newspaper. Owen, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, FIFA has investigated itself. FIFA has cleared itself. Says nothing wrong been going on here. It's all above board. Let's get on with this. What do you make of that?
Well, quite. I mean, it's a typical FIFA farce in a sense. I mean, we've become used to this down the years. I don't think anyone takes it too seriously when it announces that it's going to investigate itself and then clears itself. But the reason why this is important is because, you have these two huge bidding races for the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. It's important they are investigated properly and that the ramifications of those chaotic and controversial bidding races come to pass. So, I mean, I think we're right to keep the pressure on FIFA to investigate these issues properly, but whether we can have any faith that they will do so, I think is another matter.
Right, so from what I'm hearing from you is that these two bids have not been investigated properly yet.
Well, I think we can have some faith in Michael Garcia. He's clearly a proper individual, a proper investigator, and he wants to be seen to have done a good job. I think he did the best job with the tools he had at his disposal, but the fact is he couldn't subpoena any witnesses, he couldn't lay his hands on all the evidence. He was told by one of the bidders, Russia, that they'd lost all their computers and the emails had been wiped, so he couldn't even examine them. And of course he couldn't speak to lots of people who'd already left football, some of these characters such as Jack Warner and Mohammed bin Hammam. So the extent to which he could do his job was limited, and even then, when he delivered his report, of course it was summarised in such a way that he was furious at the way it had been summarised. So I think in terms of what's already out in public, we can't be confident in that. We can be confident, I think, that Michael Garcia did the best job with the tools that he had available, but even then that had its own inherent limitations.
Right. Qatar's World Cup Organising Committee released the following statement on the FIFA report, and the statement reads, "As the report notes, we cooperated fully with the Ethics Committee's investigation. We have always been confident of our position and stand by the integrity and quality of our bid." What do you make of that?
That's right. I mean, I think it's important in all of this that we give Qatar a fair hearing. I mean, their bid was, for all that people think it's an incredibly odd place to hold a football tournament, particularly in the middle of summer in temperatures of up to 50 degrees or over 50 degrees. For all that, they did run a convincing campaign. What we don't know was what Mohammed bin Hammam, who was the Qatari vice president of FIFA, who sat on the executive committee but claimed to be at arm's length from the bid. There have been all sorts of allegations regarding his behaviour, some of which are actually summarised in the FIFA summary. So, we know that these question marks, and we still can't be clear to what extent the behaviour that he was getting up to, making these payments to football officials, making these payments to other members of the executive committee, we can't be sure to what extent that was linked to the bid. So I think we need to give Qatar a fair hearing. I understand what they're saying when they say that they behaved within the limitations of the bid as they were written, because actually there were no rules to this bidding process, and that was another one of the problems. But I think it has to be investigated properly, and we haven't had that yet.
Right. If you listen to the FIFA version of events, it seems that FIFA was acting from very altruistic motives when they decided to entertain the idea of Qatar becoming a World Cup host. It said that that decision would expand the game, that it would be the first time it would be in an Arab country, and it's been in Africa, it's been in Asia, it's been in Europe, it's been in America. Why not the Middle East?
I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with a World Cup one day taking place in that part of the world. Maybe it could be spread around several countries in the Gulf. Maybe it could act as a bridge between East and West and expand football into these new territories, but not in this way. I mean, it was a completely flawed process. It was a flawed vote, and for those reasons, I think that we need to get some answers about what exactly went on. I think I'm not ideologically opposed to a World Cup happening in that part of the world, but it has to be properly planned, properly voted on, and there needs to be an element of straightforward planning about it, and not the current chaos that we have.
Right. Talking about answers, FIFA's president, Sepp Blatter, he's been front and centre in this controversy. He's a lightning rod for controversy. This is what he said. He said, "If we had anything to hide, we would hardly be taking this matter to the office of the Attorney General." What is your view of how Blatter's been handling this?
Well, it's classic Sepp Blatter. I mean, in some quarters he's painted as a buffoon, as an idiot, and he's not that. He's a very canny politician, and this is a sort of a time-honoured tactic from him in some ways, in that he tends to obfuscate, he tends to introduce new regulatory processes. He'll kick the can further down the road and kick it into the long grass if he can. And I think this tactic of taking the matter to the Swiss Attorney General's office achieves two things. One, it puts some of those former enemies back in the frame, so we may well see that some of those people that have been cast from the FIFA Executive Committee may well see themselves in line for criminal charges, which doesn't hurt Blatter too much. In fact, it probably helps him. And also, it just elongates the entire process. The Swiss judicial system isn't known for its speed, and I think this will just basically allow him to be saying he's doing something while simultaneously doing nothing. So, I mean, Sepp Blatter is a very clever politician in many ways, but what he tends to care about is his own personal power and not necessarily what's best for the game or what's best for getting to the truth of what happened in these processes.
Right, let's look at another issue which has been making a lot of news, especially in your newspaper, The Guardian. The Guardian is focused on the treatment of migrant workers in Qatar. Here's a segment of a Guardian report. Let's watch this.
Some of them said they have not been paid for 5 months.
प्रब्लम त यहाँ धेरै छ सर है अब तपाईको पानीकै विषयमा हेरौँ अब नुनी यताउता युज गर्ने पानी नै हाम्रो नुनिलो पुरै नुन भएकै पानी छ है खाने पानी पनि अब त्यति राम्रो पानी दिइराखेको छैन अलिकति विश्वास पनि नगर्ने ठाउँ भइसक्यो अब 4-4 महिना 5-5 महिनासम्म त स्यालेरी एउटा त कस्तो नदेला भन्ने उनीहरुको भनाइ आइराखेको हुन्छ यहाँ बच्चाले त बाबा घर कहिले आउने त्यही त अरु के बोल्न जान्छ र है
The guys here, there's 65 of them from India, Sri Lanka, Nepal. They're getting into big debt and they're living in really, really appalling conditions. No showers, salty water, and it's making them sick, and it's really shocking to see. It really is.
So, Owen, these are serious allegations there. No water. We know that a number of workers have died in Qatar, that their passports have been confiscated. A lot of them have not been paid. They need exit permits to leave the country. Since The Guardian reported these serious worker abuses, even death, has much improved in Qatar?
Well, I think what we can say is that the Qataris recognise they've got a problem here, and they've got a problem for two reasons. One, simply for the way they're viewed by the rest of the world, and one, I think they genuinely do recognise they need to overhaul their practices in the construction sector. The problem they've got is the pace of change in that country and in that region is so vast. They need this huge army of migrant workers to fuel the construction boom, and that's led to all these appalling practices mushrooming, really. They tell us that they are planning to bring in a replacement for the kafala system. Now, the kafala system is a system by which employers are tied to their contractor for the entire period that they're in the country. They can't leave the country without the permission of those who employed them, and this has also led to all sorts of abuses. They say they'll overhaul this, but what they're going to bring in is a new contract-based system which will still tie those workers to their employer for the period of their contract. So is it a huge improvement, is the question that human rights groups are asking. And similarly with other reforms they've made, they've promised to increase the number of inspections, they promised to bring in new rules to improve the conditions in which workers live, but I think the jury is very much out on whether they're going to have a material effect on the ground, on the lives of these workers. And it's interesting that we spent such a long time after the vote really focusing on issues like when the World Cup was going to be played and on how the World Cup was won, and really the plight of these workers was going under the radar until the work of some human rights groups and some of my colleagues in bringing it to light.
And just for the record, Qatar's sports minister did say that the country is looking at these complaints, these grievances about the manner in which it treats migrant workers, and he said, quote, "It is something that really needs big work from us, but we are really tackling this problem face to face. We are not hiding." What about the stadiums, the facilities that Qatar will be promising? They're promising a world-class event. Do we have any reason to believe that it'll be otherwise?
Well, I mean, they have delivered huge amounts of infrastructure in that country in a very short space of time. I've got no doubt they can build the stadiums, and what they're offering is actually quite a different sort of World Cup. They're saying that it's obviously a very small country. It'll be a World Cup more like an Olympic Games than a World Cup. So there'll be a short distance between the stadiums. People will be able to see 2 or 3 games in one day, and so on. And maybe the fan experience won't be as bad as some people think it will. You will be able to get an alcoholic drink. It'll probably be quite a Western experience for a lot of the fans who actually can travel there. But I think the the difficulty in getting there in terms of the amount of miles they've got to travel to reach the point at which they can reasonably host a World Cup. And I think all the problems that they've obviously encountered around migrant workers, around the way in which they won it in the first place, are all getting in the way at the moment from the actual delivery. I mean, and that's before we even got onto the issues about the heat and when it should be played. And so at the moment, all the noise around it is stopping them focusing on the actual delivery of the stadiums and on the tournament, and this is going to carry on until the first ball is kicked in 2022, I suspect.
Right, just on that question of when the tournament will be played, winter or summer, there is talk right now that the games may be played in the winter. Will that work especially for the other federations and leagues around the world?
Well, this is one of the other ludicrous things about this whole process. Almost as soon as the vote was made on December the 2nd, 2010, some of those who'd voted for Qatar started talking about playing it in the European winter, so playing it in November or December of 2022 or January or February of 2022, which to my mind invalidated the whole vote, because they'd voted for a Summer World Cup and immediately they were talking about changing the date. I think it is inevitable the date will change. I think almost certainly that will end up being November 2022, which will impact on the European football season. It'll obviously impact on American sport, and there'll be compensation that has to be paid as a result of that. But I think everyone is now resigned to the fact you can't play a tournament in 50-degree heat. It's not fair on the players, it's not fair on the fans, and therefore it will have to be probably in November of that year, with all the knock-on effects and all the complications for the global sporting calendar that will entail.
Oh, and looking at the bigger picture, the broader picture here, you know, especially amid all this controversy that we're hearing about, what could this do for football? Would it globalize the sport even more, or has there been some serious damage here done, not just to FIFA, but to the sport as well, that it's going to take a long time to recover from?
Well, the FIFA excuse, if you like, the FIFA strategic reason for taking the World Cup to new lands, I think is a sound one. I mean, we've seen it with the IOC and the Olympics. You know, it is important to take these events outside the traditional hosts that usually stage them, but in doing that you've got to show some form of responsibility, and you've got to have some standards beyond simply going where the check is biggest. And I think that that's the mistake that FIFA have made. If you contrast their approach with that of the IOC, they've been very careful to balance the attempt to move to new lands such as Rio, with going to the heartlands such as London and Tokyo. And I think that's the right approach. And I think this will do untold damage to the game of football. Back-to-back World Cups in Russia and Qatar are sort of unprecedented challenge, both in terms of staging them and in terms of the issues that surround them, the political issues and the human rights issues. So I think it will be incredibly difficult for FIFA both to deliver these World Cups and to justify the fact they're having them in the first place.
Owen Gibson, thanks for joining us, sir. We are going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll get a Qatari perspective. Stay with us. This is The Heat.